Welcome, folks, to the Squeaky Wheel, where we bring you conversation from a Métis perspective. With me, as always, my very good friend, the co-host of the Squeaky Wheel, the president, Lawrence Gervais. And folks, I'm Ross Memphis Pambrun, the CEO of the Memphis Group. I like long walks on the beach. Currently, I do because I'm in the Okanagan, as you can see from the fact that my usual telltale background is a little different. Convalescing as a result of a badminton-related injury and an Achilles heel tear. But thank goodness for the success, as far as I'm concerned, of our healthcare system for taking good care of us and taking very good care of me. And yes, though you can't see that I'm in a cast, I'm definitely in one. And it's not fun or glamorous, but for all of you who have been through one of these, I'm learning about your journey. Lawrence, today...
Yep. So you're probably number one, the last of the Albertans over there currently, right? Like, eventually we all come back to the province.
And I will be next week, but yes, and I will be moving back. And this place is wonderful because there's no stairs. And when you are,
right.
I've never had one of these kind of casts on my ankle, covering my ankle and leg before. My home has a number of stairs. So this place is a delight. And I'm able to push my little trolley cart around with my leg on it.
Oh, can we see it? Can we see your trolley cart?
Well, just in front of my guitar is my trolley cart.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
It even has a basket. That's so cool.
When I went in to see the orthopedics specialist, he looked at me, he's like, "What do you carry around in that basket?" And I thought that was at first quite of an odd question, but I came to realize just how valuable that little basket is when I'm carrying around muffins, maybe the occasional banana.
I thought you were going to say your tears.
I tend to cover the handlebars with blankets because the tears hit the handlebars and it's hard for me to grab my hand. Haven't you, Lawrence, from my knowledge of Lawrence Gervais, had 2 Achilles injuries during your time in dance?
Yeah.
Yes. So, I
on
wish
the same
I had
heel.
a picture of that when you were hobbling around.
Well, they didn't give me a trolley cart, but I kind of toughed it out with a nice big cast.
Though I don't wish this on anybody, it is this is part of Memphis Pambrun's journey of, instead of being able to just dance around on stage holding my guitar, here all of a sudden I'm dancing around just trying to brush my teeth. And when you go to stand up, if there isn't something there to support that other leg, I feel like I'm going to tumble over at any moment. But I mean, you had your injury in front of the fire chief. I had mine in front of like 6,000 people I didn't even know and didn't even see. That's true. Did yours happen on stage like that?
Yeah, they had to drag me off.
Okay, I just, you kind of assume that you do so much practice that it would have happened then, not during that period of time when you're actively performing.
Yeah, I mean, in the wings, you're kind of freaking out, but that's just life.
Did they just, somebody else rushes on the stage and takes over from you?
No.
It wasn't quite that easy. The backups weren't just sort of standing there going, here it comes, here it comes, here it comes. And then they just rush it.
Well, I finished a Métis piece and I kind of finished right at the corner of the stage and that's where it happened. And I just kind of, they could see there was a problem and the boys just grabbed me and pulled me out. Right. So, and
did they just
kind of like I was in a war zone, like this is,
Wow. Oh boy. Yeah, that's a little bit, that sounds stressful. So Lawrence, today, folks, here on the Squeaky Wheel, we tend to follow a little bit of a format. We talk a little bit about coffee. Lawrence and I generally rant about something, and I think I have my notes here on what that is today. We have our invited guest on, who is right up there as far as I'm concerned in the education opportunity and education development world. Miss Lisa Crookshank, who's with the Rupertland Institute. So I'm very excited we get a chance to finally, hopefully, showcase the people behind who are helping educate, not just our post-secondary students, but also supporting right now, and for those challenges within our pandemic community, the K-12s. They're covering the whole gamut of people within within our Métis Nation to try and support for education. And then, folks, we talk just a little bit about another rant that Lawrence and I have, and then we usually close out our time. And of course, as always, we thank our listeners who listen to us both on the video as well as those of you who just listen to our podcast, and thank all of those people behind the scenes who are helping us along with this. So, Lawrence, today, because I'm in the Okanagan, I picked up an espresso of Lions Bay. Now, because I'm this far away, unfortunately, I didn't get a chance to send you any this time, but I can tell you it is a dark, rich, rewarding coffee, and it is absolutely delightful. And there's also something, though it is brighter as far as I'm concerned in Alberta, the rain's starting to come here. So it is warming me. So folks, for all of you back home who get that sunshine all the time, don't consider me a BCan just yet. Thank you to those of you who do, but I am an Albertan and this coffee is delightful. So Lawrence, the thing I wanted to talk to you today about before we bring Lisa on was the opening and closing of schools. What do you think, whose responsibility is it? And how do the families versus the province versus the school boards, how do we manage that? And are we doing it right? That's not actually a fair question. Are we doing the best we can? Because it's confusing.
Well, for me, the reason why they chose to open the schools was because of the hospital bit. You know, from my understanding, that there wasn't as many people using those. Well, therefore, we should open the floodgate just a little bit. But they're at schools, they're opening it just, you know, on a wide berth.
Yeah.
Their expectation for the students to stay clear of one another, well, that's, you know, probably a little bit tough to manage. To depend on the teachers to sort of supervise that is probably tough to manage. Whether or not the kids are wearing their masks according where they should be, that's another thing to manage. And it's just, it puts a lot more stuff onto the teachers and their responsibility.
I think it's important that the kids try to, you know, do a bit of their distancing. But realistically, I don't think there is anybody who is older than 10 years old who didn't realize you send kids back to school, they're going to want to play. But I think putting people back into where there is that connection that's going to occur between children, we are seeing the rises in numbers, but doesn't seem as though we're overwhelming our healthcare system. So maybe that herd exposure is occurring. I think the schools are doing a great job. I think they've come up with reasonable strategies. Yeah. That if something is happening, well, then we have to shut the school.
It's gonna be a while before we get to the endemic piece of all this, right? So, you know, starts with epidemic, it goes to pandemic, and then it goes to endemic, right? And an endemic usually means 50% of the whole population of the world is either immune or have a vaccine, right? Before it's
or both.
That's right.
Yeah.
And the Spanish flu in 1918 that everyone keeps talking about, well, we still have that virus in the community.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That the virus never goes away. Coronavirus will never ever go away. It's how we adapt to it, right?
Yeah.
And how we focus on doing that.
Yeah. So a big shout out to all those teachers who are still doing their job and who still have the same anxieties of having to go to work. I think it's something that happens within all industries. At the time, we were worried for our grocery store workers and our truck drivers who had to bring our food around. And now it's for the families and the respect we have to give those teachers who are going to work and doing their job of sharing that knowledge and education and bringing all these little guys up, little gals and girls up. So thank you for that. Lawrence, maybe that is the right time when it comes to education to open up the floor to bring our guest onto the squeaky wheel. And And Lawrence, this is our opportunity to finally welcome our guest to the show here on the Squeaky Wheel. Today's guest, and a very lovely one, I've had a few opportunities to have some conversations with, Miss Lisa Crookshank, who now, just so I make sure that I hit all of the titles that we have for you, you are the Director of Métis Education and Lifelong Learning with the Rupertland Institute. So here on the Squeaky Wheel, most of the folks, Lisa, already know a fair bit about Lawrence and I. And they know his character, they know my character, the witty banter that happens back and forth. And it's very easy for us to jump in on what your role is within Rupertland. But before we get to that, and what often becomes a theme within the Squeaky Wheel is, if you're comfortable with it, we'd like to ask a little bit about the background. I'm comfortable or confident that you identify as a Métis individual, Métis citizen, and what part of that journey was for you. Because for us, and Lawrence and I have talked about it a lot, his family with a musical history, my father with a military background, and the journey for those individuals sometimes was a bit of a challenge. And for me, it was in my 30s when I started to realize, okay, I'm Métis. What does that mean? And where did that journey start for you?
Well, this is a good question. So for me, growing up, I found out when I was about 8 or 10 that I was adopted. And my parents at the time made it sound like you were so special, you were chosen. And my mom had gone on to say, you were chosen because we got to pick you out of like a photo album of all these children. And I always thought that was kind of weird, but it made me feel special. And nonetheless, I just grew up and I always wanted to be a teacher. And so, after I graduated, I wasn't sure actually back then what I wanted to do. And I wanted to go to school, but there were challenges with money and I thought, I'll just work. And then in my early 20s, both my parents who adopted me passed away suddenly, separately between different years. And so I ended up just working for a while. But after I lost my mom, I thought, you know what? I'm just going to do it. I'm going to go to school. I'm going to become a teacher. I'm just going to do, life is short. You never know. So I ended up going to school and I became a teacher and I ended up teaching. I think I was 27 when I graduated. And I just worked with Edmonton Catholic schools. And I was like probably in my 17th year in, or maybe even my 15th, I became really interested in, we went for a PD and I learned about residential schools and I just became quite curious about it. And then an opportunity came up for me where someone from Indigenous Learning Services approached me and said, we're looking for a consultant and would you be interested in joining our team? And I was like, sure, but I don't really know anything about, the culture. I don't know anything, but I was doing PD for my own staff as a lead teacher at my school. And that's where she saw me and she said, well, I just think you'd be great and you can learn the culture. Why don't you join our team? So I did. In 2014, I became a consultant with our district and I started to learn so much and I started to feel really connected to something I really didn't know about. And I remember it was coming up to Métis week. And so myself and some other colleagues went into the Métis Nation provincial office and we were looking for resources. And this lady looked at me and she said, well, you're Métis, right? And I was like, oh, I don't know, actually. I said, I don't know what I am. It says I'm French on my records, but I really didn't. I never knew what I was. People asked me that my whole life. They're like, what are you? Or, where are you from? And I was always like, I don't know, I'm French, or I think I'm Italian, or I don't know what I am. Like people would be like, are you Asian? Are you Chinese? And I never knew. So it was just kind of, I never really thought about it before. But that day I walked into the office, the ladies were like, we're pretty sure you're Métis. And I kind of went into a conversation saying, well, when I was younger, I did put my name on the registry and it came back as Alison Grace Labucan.
Ah,
And I said, well, I know I'm French because it's La Boucan is French. And they all just started laughing and they were like, well, actually, that's the Métis name, you're
yeah.
you're Métis, girl. And I'm like, oh, so it led to just, them recommending me to find my adoption file because in 2005 in Alberta, they all became open. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is really strange. And this is all ironic because this actually happened on my birthday, November 5th. And I thought, oh my gosh, okay. So I went back to the office and I called the number and the lady said, yeah, we can give you your file. And so it came back and, I was really scared to open it because I always thought growing up, people would say, well, don't you want to find your real parents or your real family one day? And I always was like, no, not really. They didn't want me. Like they gave me up. Like, why would they want me? Why would I want to find them if they didn't want me? So I always felt like that. And as I joined the Indigenous learning team and started learning about residential schools and learning about the 60 scoop, I started to actually realize, well, oh, maybe what if this happened to me, because I have a brother too who was adopted and he had found out he was part of that story. And I thought, oh my gosh, like maybe I should find out. So I did. And I opened the file and I found out that both my parents, my biological parents, were both still alive. And my mother was from Lac La Biche and my father is from Fort McMurray. And I thought, my gosh, this is so strange. And they were young, like they were only in their 60s. And this is in 2016. This kind of all happened. So I thought, well, and I came across this page called Lac La Biche and its history. And I thought, well, I wonder if I can put a post up there. So I ended up, the lady said, yeah, go ahead. Well, the next night, my Facebook Messenger blew up and I had like 63 messages in there saying, oh my gosh, you're my cousin, or, oh, I know your mother, I know your father. And it was so overwhelming. And I got a phone call and this girl was like, I'm your sister. Like, I am your sister. I knew about you. Mom told me about you my whole life. And I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't expect this. So it has really been the last, 4 years have really been amazing. I had reconnected to obviously the Métis community, but in the meantime, with my work in 2017, so about a year after I started working at Rupertland, I started, this happened in 2016, and then someone in some connection that I had, Solange Lalonde, actually used to work for Rupertland. She knew me through my district, and she was leaving, and she had recommended me to Rupertland, and I'm like, what's Rupertland? I didn't know what it was, and so I went over and met with Lauren, and he's like, yeah, you should join our team, and so I did. And it's just ironic how when you say what led you to where you are today, in my younger years, I always thought, people would always say God has a plan for you or Creator has a plan for you. And I would always say, oh yeah, right. I don't believe that. I think people make up their own destiny with their own choices. But now that I'm older, I'm like, okay, obviously this is where I'm meant to be. Like the path led me here. And now, the first AGA I ever attended was in Lac La Biche. And my birth mom, was there. I'm going to cry with all my family. And I thought, oh my gosh, like I'm home. Like this is so weird how everything kind of has come around full circle. And so with my years of education and teaching, and now being the director for Métis Education, it's just really a dream, I guess, come true. I never thought that anything like this would ever happen to me. And to have the connection to community and be involved, at this level. And it's really been amazing. So I just feel very blessed to be here, to share my story. And I'm learning lots. Like when we talk about lifelong learning in the title there, like
Yeah.
it really is. And it's been a journey. And yeah, so everything is going really well. And I'm just happy and grateful.
I think that you have a very rich story. And often the people that we talk to, one of their connections as with the Métis community is just learning, but they already have a background or an awareness. Your journey is almost a triangle of things. And I could hear that there's a number of things that were blessings in your life, I guess, for lack of a better term, because it's bringing a lot of that together. and it's easy, I find, on the squeaky wheel to try and jump into what we might consider frustration in politics, or the success of programs and the engagement with the Métis. But as you identified yourself, and I've identified, a lot of times there's a lack of connecting with youth, or there's a lack of connecting with our elders. The squeaky wheel was a tool to say, how can we tell some more stories? And again, it's easy to jump into other stuff, but having a connection with you and being able now to share that story is delightful. It's absolutely wonderful. And now I can see it also in how you're carrying your education into Rupertland, and how you're going to share that message with the Ks to 12s and the post-secondaries, and they get a chance to see the journey. This, for everybody, it's a journey. A lot of times we just think it's living. No, it's your journey. It's your story.
Yeah, I want to say, shout out to Solange Lalonde and all the work she's done in the past, and the mentioning of our CEO, Rupertland Institute, Lauren Gladue, and his new title is he's a doctor currently, and that's probably new for him too. And then shout out to Lac La Biche and the Jiggers Pub. I mean, that's a great place to go and hang out, but no, and I want to thank you for sharing your story. It's, we kind of ask, people, and sometimes they are personal, and especially with the ones who've had that minimal impact with adoption and where their journey goes. And there's a lot of Métis folks that are still trying to find who they are through that whole system, and I wish them all the best, and hopefully they can get to where as far as you got to, one day. So that's, what we think about.
Yeah. After that story, your smile's even brighter than when we started. That was fantastic. Thank you, Lisa, for sharing that information and that journey in your history. Now, let's talk a little bit about Lisa Crookshank. So, director since November of 2017. And I know Rupertland focuses on the training, research, but the education. And I think today, because with your background, your title, we're here to talk a bit about the education that's happening within that agency and with the opportunities for the Métis community. So, one of the questions I had made a note for myself was, we had talked before about Rupertland reimagining, maybe that's not the right term, but creating some new opportunities for the post-secondary students. What can you tell us about what's happening out there right now? And or are you aware of what are the stresses that are happening within your agency or from the students? Take us through a little bit of the journey of when you come to Rupertland, because this same journey for me of having understood what Rupertland meant to the Métis community in the term itself versus the difference between then what became the Rupertland Institute and the relationship with the Alberta government, which I think there's a 10-year funding relationship till the end of 2029. These are all new to me. Again, I have some familiarity, but I've never gone through the process. Maybe you and Lawrence could also talk, because Lawrence, I know you have a very tight relationship with Rupertland Institute in your role. Maybe you could both help me understand this, and then our listeners.
Would you like me to go first, Lawrence?
Sure, Lisa. Yeah.
Sure.
Well, there's been a lot. I mean, previously to Rupertland Institute, and I just want to do a shout out to, we're celebrating our 10-year anniversary this year. So it was established in 2010. Previous to that, it was the labor market development program with the Métis Nation of Alberta, and so it became large enough to establish our own institute. And so back in 2010, that's how it kind of transitioned. Okay. And so really, the provincial council did grant Rupertland Institute 3 mandates, so education, training, and research. And the training mandate was the labor market development, and really 98% of the funding comes federally for that program. So that's the 10 offices that we have across the province, and really that is where I think that is what Rupertland is really well known for, is helping people through training programs, whether it's trades and apprentices, whether it's, certificate programs or their final year of post-secondary or college or diploma. And that's what they're known for. And so they, every year we help over 1,000 community members get back, get their training, get into the labor market. So, that's kind of the main, or has been the main engine of Rupertland, I guess you can say. But back previously, a few years to that, post-secondary was a focus in terms of funding because we funded the final year. Lauren set up, I think it was, I don't want to say if it's wrong, Grant McEwen was the first endowment that I believe that they set up with post-secondary. So what happened was they created the Métis Education Foundation, which is actually another affiliate of the Métis Nation of Alberta, but Rupertland manages it. And so Lisa Saville is the associate director of that. And her and Lauren over the years have developed endowments with 17 post-secondary institutions across the province. And I believe the portfolio is just over $30 million now. And so the interest from those endowments, which are made up of matching dollars through the institutes in Rupertland, there are Métis Scholar Awards that are administrated or given out. People apply for them, different students at different post-secondary. And so that was an additional way to help fund post-secondary or help students go to post-secondary, was through the Scholar Awards. And so that was kind of a really huge, unique thing. That was kind of like a part of the education mandate. And so because they did such a good job with that back in 2012, I believe our president, Patra, said to Lauren, you're doing such a good job with that. Well, how about you take over the K-12 mandate? And so I believe he was like, okay, sure, let's try it, So the mandate was given over to us. And at the time, I believe Yvonne Patra-Pratt became the associate director. And they worked hard to, have a relationship with the ministry, Alberta Education. After a year, I don't know if the government changed. The funding was actually lost, but due to Lauren's persistence and letter writing, and he ended up getting it back. So there was a time period where we had it, we lost it. And in the meantime, he created the Alberta Métis Education Council. And so we knew that, I think at the time, he knew that one person, to have that one position for the whole province is challenging. So the idea was to create this council of, educators who, have a K-12 background, PhDs, masters, to be an advisory council to the associate director. And so that had been done. And then that's when I believe Solange came in, and the funding turned into, you mentioned the 10-year framework agreement. So part of that, and to increase the dollars for that, we ended up applying for conditional grants through the ministry, and were successful. And so she was instrumental in developing and getting Rupertland, or getting the Métis voice into the new teaching quality standard. We call it the TQS, where all teachers are bound to being competent in all these different competencies across, they have to learn. It's now, in 2019, they have to learn about residential schools, treaty education, Métis legislation and agreements. So that was excellent, because that led us to apply for another grant, which is when I started, and it's become a 3-year project. And we really knew that we needed to provide and create authentic Métis education resources for teachers by Métis educators, so that when I first came, it was like, Kate, find some other very highly experienced educators who know how to create the resources. And that has really turned into an amazing thing. Like, we really didn't think we would have what we have today. And so, on our website now, we have over 37 lesson plans. We do professional development across the province. We've become members of CAS, the College of Alberta School Superintendents. So people know that Rupertland is the education authority for Métis education. We sit on 13 different committees. So Alberta School Board Association, the ATA, we're all now part of that education stakeholder group. So our voice is at those tables to advocate for our Métis students and to help ensure that teachers are learning what, like you said, what does it mean to be Métis? Métis identity, our history, how unique yet diverse we are, and that, we don't want our students to be considered, oh, you're an FNMI student, or, it's not that pan-Aboriginal approach. And since 2015, when the TRC made their 94 calls to action, a lot of school districts are part of that reconciliation process, and we are now asked to go everywhere. And so we're building capacity. We have a train the trainer program where we're training Métis educators to go out and be leaders in their districts, to deliver the PD themselves in their own communities. So it's really been a great journey. And so that has really been my focus. But then in the last year, when the post-secondary Métis Nation strategy was signed federally, we knew it was coming. And that's really what we've been working on as well. In 2018, there was even signed about early learning. So early learning and childcare, that's another framework agreement. And so it's kind of like it all kind of started slowly, with the K-12, and now it's just kind of amazingly blown up to expand into that lifelong learning spectrum, which includes early learning, K-12. We also were successful in the languages, Indigenous Languages for Education grant, and now post-secondary. So it's very exciting to talk about because it really has grown so much in the last 3 to 3 years, really.
Congratulations on the 10 years to even hear the steps that have been taken. But as I've noticed from owning business myself, that success begets success. And when all of a sudden you have a good program and people identify and see that it's a good program, people want to be involved. They want to learn more. One of the things I've found too is in conversations that I've had with a lot of people when they, oh, you're Métis, tell me more. Though I've gotten to the point where I have a pretty good idea what Métis is, it's taken me a while for that part of that journey for myself. So how do I expect teachers who weren't having the resources before to all of a sudden say, oh, well, here's who the Métis people are? Well, you might not be sharing the right message or the connection. So having groups like yours who are helping frame that conversation and the advisory boards, this is where it comes from. And a lot of it comes to me from Lawrence. Lawrence has a longer history, and he's definitely more involved in active day-to-day things. That this is where I get some of my awareness from.
Yeah, I mean, this was my portfolio for about 4 years, and then now I sit on the board of governors at Rupertland, and very proud to be there. I think a lot of that has to do with the attitudes at the sort of the higher levels of government. It's not us as a Métis Nation. We know how to provide this program, but it's really them to go, yeah, they do. And this is how we're going to move forward. And, sometimes when government changes, the attitudes change a little bit too. And we have to adapt to that also. But, Rupertland is still going strong. We're still going to go as far as even the Métis flag suggests, to infinity. We're not going to go away.
No.
And so, in terms of reconciliation, a proper reconciliation model for you as a government or an institution is to adopt the Métis model. And how do you get to the Métis model? Well, you come to Rupertland and we let you know, and this is how we move forward together, in unison, rather than us trying to have to fight to get in there. Really, they have to understand that if you really want the 94 calls to action and really adopt that as your principle and your model for reconciliation, well, then you need to speak to Rupertland.
Yeah, maybe that's one of the best parts of that relationship and that tool for lack of a better
hopefully
term,
that will go down
Rupertland.
to the teachers and to the students, but it needs to start at the very beginning, the very crux of where the actual solution should happen.
Now, are there any new programs in order to so we get a chance to throw something in there? Is there anything new, Lisa? Because that was a great overview. And I think that's the most important part. I know that people can already go to, what do I have down here? www.rupertland.org/Métis/homeland is a great spot to get a better picture of what Rupertland was and a Métis history and a simple connection with identifying who the Métis people are. But rupertland.org gets you into the website. So that's there. And you hit great on the point of the K-12s or actually starting at the post-secondaries and then moving back and developing the skills and the awareness for the K-12s. Is there an age for anybody that shouldn't be looking at Rupert's Land, or should everybody who's Métis, who's exploring, wanting to take on another level of education, should they all start at Rupert's Land?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So, I mean, early learning, we are in the process of doing our research piece for that and bringing forward some recommendations on some different avenues that we can go with the existing framework agreement that has 9 goals, overarching goals. So we always need to realign and go back. I want to say, Jenna always says, hang our hat on that, because that's the accord. And so anything we do has to tie back to those goals in terms of moving forward with early learning education. So, because there's almost 2 parts to that. It's early learning and child care. So Rupertland Institute, because we have the education mandate, really want to focus on the early learning part of that. I believe M&A is working hard to incorporate in some of their action plans for the childcare piece, and I mean, we're working really closely with the department over there in terms of that. But I mean, any age, I mean, for K to 12, for the newest thing, like you said, for post-secondary is, I want to kind of jump back to that, because yes, there have always been the endowments, or, you know, since I think 2008 that started. And we were always able to fund final year through the training mandate.
Right.
But now I'm happy to share with our new program, we will be able to fund year 1, 2, 3, and 4.
Folks, you heard it here first. I'd say, for the most part, I'd say you heard it here first. That is fantastic. That's congratulations. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very exciting. I mean, of course, there's criteria and there's different things. I mean, it truly is. When I share this to some of our summer students that work with us over this summer, and some of them, it doesn't matter what they're in, but there's a few education students, their eyes just popped out of their heads and they were like, are you serious? Like, this is really what you've been working on all summer? And I said, yeah. So, I mean, our goal is that applications will open early November. We'll have a 2-week window, and so they can apply for their January semester. So they'll receive funding, and then we also have another section. So we have the funding piece for the tuition, but we also have something new called Métis Student Services. So, I mean, government terms, they call those wraparound services, but I mean, you know, often you know that students, they need more than just money, right? Like, I mean, money is a big thing, you know, they need the money to go to school, but that's not just where it ends. We're not just going to throw them some money. We're going to, you know, actually have, we have a program and an infrastructure in place where they will be supported throughout their whole journey of all 4 years or 2 years or whatever it is that they're taking, that they will actually have someone that they can connect with. And that someone, their PSC advisor, will help support them in really whatever they need. So whether it's, you know, I mean, it really just depends on what they need. So we have set it up in a way where, you know, we're not just going to be like, here you go, congratulations, here's some money, but it's like, we're going to take them through and be able to support them throughout their whole post-secondary journey. So I'm very excited about it.
Congratulations. Lawrence, I think,
I don't take all the credit. That's a lot to do with Lauren's wedding. Yeah.
And I'm happy to see each time we have opportunities to go into these education centers that they are engaging their Indigenous communities through their Native study rooms or Indigenous connection centers. I know SAIT does a great job, the universities, they're all doing a better job. And I think those are the part of the segues, apart from the squeaky wheel and somebody listening to this, another tool to find somebody like Rupert's Land Institute. So I think you've answered the questions that I had a burning desire regarding what was the overarching plan. And thank you for sharing that, your message as well as the education. Lawrence, can you thank our guest as well for us because I'm almost overwhelmed with the stuff that I've learned today.
Well, I mean, hopefully Ross can transfer this to his nephews because they're always asking about Rupert's Land and their endowments and all that. Because I think they're at SAIT now currently, aren't they?
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's an endowment there. But yeah, I want to thank Lisa for coming on, Crookshank. The door is always open. The Rupertland door is always open here at the Squeaky Wheel. And we hopefully have either you and Lauren to come back and talk about some more initiatives and talk about maybe the research and the employment arm too one day. Yep. And because there's so much happening with the Métis Nation, we thought we'd start this podcast just to educate our folks, educate everybody about who the Métis Nation are, so I don't have to sit in these boardrooms and answer their questions, and I can get to other business instead of explaining who the Métis Nation are. But I think I'll probably end up doing that for a long time. That's just the way it is. But no, I want to thank Lisa for being here, and send a nice message to Lauren, and congratulations to him on his doctorate. And yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for sharing this message, and I look forward to our next conversation.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I've heard about the Squeaky Wheel podcast, and we like to feature it on our social media too. So I think it's great, and I love it. So I'm just thankful that I had the opportunity to share today, and look forward to hearing more from you guys.
And a shout out, I guess, to us, Lawrence, is Lisa, if you get a chance, what Lawrence and I, one of the big things that we're working on, because we wanted to figure out a better way to share the message of the most simple things. So we do our 3 to 5 minute vignettes that we call Muskrat Tales, Tales. That was Lawrence's, it was a charming idea. And it's the first one that we did was, what was a Red River cart? 3 minutes. And people watch that one because it just answers that question. Then what were cart trails? Then what is pemmican? And we're constantly, and these are the ones that we wanted to get to the students who are K to 12. If I didn't know the answer to most of these questions, how do they? But we try and put it in a real short, fun way. And our team, and Jason does a great job of putting the pictures and the videos in so that 3 to 5 minutes, yeah, share that message. And just as much as we're going to share the success of Rupertland and the Métis community.
Awesome. Well, we
Thanks,
can
Lisa.
definitely share all those little vignettes on our website too. So I don't know if you can see this, a Red River cart.
There, Red River cart right there.
Yeah.
No, it's great. I think we're doing some good work here, and we're all stronger together when we share and support each other in our work. So I think moving forward, it's just going to be really great.
Thank you. Thanks for your time.
Yeah.
Well, that woman told such a bright and positive story about herself that I feel rewarded. Again, I sometimes look at the journey that I take through the Métis community and my awareness, and it's just understanding, what role or what relationship my history of family history has within the Métis. She was starting a journey long before and connected with the Métis community, and then also needed to try and understand the same as the rest of us about the Métis community and that relationship. And how lucky are we? She's so well spoken, and definitely all educators I find are, in carrying that education background into the Rupertland Institute. Boy, that group seems very well set up for success. I think that's fantastic.
Yeah, I mean they do take their time, and they're well thought out, individuals and professionals, even the board of governors that sit at the table, and they all have a main purpose, is to get our citizens educated and get them all the training they need for employment, and that those things are vital. And then doing all the research on top of that to, sort of support all those activities. It's a pretty amazing group. And I'm very excited to see that they're providing more funding for, at least the first and second years, because it was always, they could only really fund the last half of everybody's education. So it's going to be interesting to see how we move forward now.
Now, is there something else? Because again, their training, their education, their research, with your background and your relationship with them, and it's unfair to ask this question of you, but is there something else that we should be asking them to participate in? Like, sounds like they're covering the K to 12s now. Now they're covering the post-secondaries. They're covering those grounds. is there something else that you see?
Well, number one, I mean, for development, they always say the first 2,000 days of life being the most important. So that's your first 5 years, and that affects you for the rest of your life. You know, certainly Rupertland can't really take care of those ages, you know, but the one thing they can do is provide childcare or, you know, support at the home. That's, you know, predominantly where I think the next big steps might be, but that could be Métis Nation of Alberta themselves sort of taking care of that on their own. But, you know,
actually, that is a fantastic point. You're right. Where does it fall? And with the world of COVID right now, those families that are trying to go to school or create those opportunities for education. Oh, great.
Yeah.
Great point that we'll have to think about, and great point to share with them to see what, you know, direction any agency, but you're right. Maybe the M&A or one of the agencies under the M&A, or we just drop them off at your house.
Or, well, here's the other thing is curriculum, right? I mean, because right now it's, you know, children learn about the Métis and social studies in what, grade 6 or 7, and it's usually just a brief paragraph and doesn't really mention a lot about Métis. It's just voyageurs, right, or we're something else, right? Or the fur trade. But you know what they don't understand is that we are children of that system for sure,
right?
But we're also an Indigenous people, and what makes us sort of distinct on our own, because that's one of the fundamental sort of guidelines for being a Métis Nation citizen is to be recognized by your own Métis community. Well, what is that Métis community? And how did they become a distinct nation? And that stuff needs to be taught in the school.
And I just think that we have to be cautious of rushing into it without, like you pointed out, without having an agency like Rupertland who can help create and direct the education portion. We'll end up in the situation of sharing misinformation.
Yeah.
Right? The history of the residential schools and what people thought they were.
And well, what happens is, you know, guys my age, you know, who are, you know, leading a lot of big companies downtown because of the school system that taught about the Métis, and all of a sudden Métis has to be on their radar because now they need to speak to us. Well, they go, well, who are they? They don't know, right?
Yeah.
And these are very academic, technical people with very high degrees from higher schools of learning that don't know who the Métis people are.
Absolutely. Yeah. Which I'm sure will be on our podcast at some point about that misinformation. So Lawrence, let's, a big thank you then to Rupertland. Big thank you to Lisa Crookshank, the director of the education portion of Rupertland, for coming on to our show. My rant today, and I think it's well timed, is winter tires. Now, I think everybody out there is probably waiting for about another month from now. But folks, I don't think you can wait any longer. I think it's time, when it gets this cold, please ensure you're doing everything in your power to get them on there. Otherwise, all you're doing is slowing down the rest of us in traffic.
Or you can just be like me and just wear your winter tires for the whole year. You know, you don't have to worry about trading them on and off, right?
Yeah. I mean, then you ultimately have some other issues that you're going to have to deal with through the course of the year when it comes to replacing those. But maybe that's the best approach to it right there. Folks, if you can't get around to putting winter tires on, just leave them on all year. Even in the summertime, you'll have very sticky tires, and it'll ensure that you always come to a stop. If you're okay, Lawrence, I'm going to close out with a big thank you again to Lisa, to our Lions Bay Coffee from the Okanagan. As we know, the reason why I'm in the Okanagan convalescing. And the thank you to our seniors, our elders. Thank you to the Mother Earth and their opportunity to be on our treaty lands and on our Métis settlement lands, and our relationship with Mother Earth, and with our relationship with our government and our family and our friends. The thank you is always to my friend, the president, the co-host, Lawrence Gervais. And I appreciate all of those listeners out there to make sure, if you can, folks, go to google.ca, get onto YouTube and click that little red button that says subscribe. That helps give us positive strength towards showcasing the fact that this Métis conversation is important. And to those people who are our sponsors, let's keep the fire burning. And Lawrence, close us out.
Well, thank you very much for tuning in today. Thanks to Lisa Crookshank for being here and for Rupertland Institute and what they do. And we always say prayers for them and what they're accomplishing and moving ahead. And I want to just thanks for being here. And I know you're in the Okanagan. You got to be aware of the Ogopogo, and I'm sure it's near Peachland because that's where all the sightings are.
Yes.
So don't go near the shore too far, okay?
Yeah.
It might suck you in. But anyways, that's it for me. And
from Ross and Lawrence, folks, thank you for listening to the Squeaky Wheel.